Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing the newly introduced Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. Now, Josh, we were talking about hate speech and how this legislation, through different aspects of it, is designed to address online hate speech. You were giving some examples from the case law of what are called the hallmarks of hatred. And I just wanted you to continue with some of those examples. Like, what exactly would constitute hate speech?
Yeah, and my point is just that it's really hard to know because some of these hallmarks of hatred are, comparing another group to animals, and we can think of examples where most people would agree that's hateful, but there's a lot of stuff that isn't. For example, if there's an extremist religious group that wants to push gay people off of buildings, should somebody who calls that group animals really be facing potential criminal charges or be hauled before a tribunal? Just to give one more example, another example is saying that a group is a powerful menace in society and blaming them for the problems in society. And, you know, that does happen in ways that are very anti Semitic or Islamophobic, but it also is lobbied against white males. For example, in certain DEI training or feminist circles, you might hear that this group is responsible for all of the problems in society. So my main point is just that it's really hard to know where the line is, and when you don't know where the line is, you are likely to self-censor, to silence, and to not participate in debates on controversial topics out of fear of possible prosecution.
Okay, one question I have is so there's criminal code amendments in this piece of legislation, but there's also this digital safety commission. This would not be on a criminal law standard. It's my understanding. So is it, and the criminal law standard is high. So I think one of the things I'm wondering about is, do you think there's a risk, Professor Geist, of content being preemptively removed by these platforms because there is this sort of perhaps lack of clarity about what might constitute hate speech or what might constitute bullying, especially to the degree that these platforms would almost by necessity need to engage with AI technology to monitor the type of content and respond to takedown requests.
Right. Well, listen, I think content moderation is hard, but I think the reality is that they are taking down or say that they take down many of that kind of content because it already violates their existing site guidelines. And we are not in this context with platforms talking about criminal law provisions or individual liability for anything anyone has said in this context. It is purely a question of the responsibility that the platforms have in dealing with it. The law establishes what's known as a duty to act responsibly, which at its heart is that they've got to try to mitigate against some of these kinds of harms. And that's frankly where all of these harms do fit together. If you believe that all of them are real harms, they already have policies in place to try to deal with it. Is it possible that there is overzealous removal of some of that content in certain circumstances? It's certainly possible, but part of what the law is trying to do is to provide far more transparency associated with developing what some of those standards look like, providing the data on how it is that they handle those things from a process that right now that often can result in removal of content and people don't quite understand why.
So it is not a criminal law penalty. These provisions, but the penalties still are quite high for non-compliance. Josh, what can you tell me about the penalties under the on social media platforms under the proposals for this Digital Safety Commission?
Yeah, so the penalty is $10 million or up to 6% of global revenues, whichever is higher. And, that's going to be, in some senses, a fairly small penalty, but I think it would be enough that they're going to design their content moderation to err on the side of caution. And I think the signal that the government is giving here is that there should be more content taken down, including that content that foments hatred that is currently being taken down. And I think a lot of people look at X or Facebook, and they think in some cases a lot of content that should be things that you should be allowed to say is already being taken down. So that's the big concern here is that the penalties, even though in one sense they're fairly small for a huge company, it's still going to lead to more speech being taken down than should be.
Now, we've only got about 30 seconds, so I'm going to propose this question to you, Professor Geist, and then we'll move to commercial and you can answer it when we come back. But one of the things I've heard concerns about are the broad powers that are going to be given to this safety commission, including powers related to search and disclosure and how and the non-requirement for warrants for some of these searches. We've got to go to break, but let's talk about that when we're back.